Transfer portal season is officially here. We're going to go over some early looks at maybe a broad view of transfer portal targets for Bill Self and KU basketball as we just get going on the opening day of transfer portal season.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're discussing early portal targets for Bill Self and Kansas basketball. We'll also touch on a little KU football as the spring portal is going to be coming up on us before you know it. So we'll get to all that on today's edition of the show. Where could KU go to? Who are some of the interesting names that have entered the portal from the KU perspective? Before we get into all that, today's episode of the show is brought to you by Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later on in the episode here with Locked On Jayhawks. All right, so without further ado, it has been a busy day, and by the time I'm recording this on Monday night, you're going to listen to this on Tuesday morning, there's going to be even more players that enter the portal between me recording this episode being released, maybe by the time you listen to this episode, that this is going to be an ever-evolving, constant thing that changes, and there's going to be new targets, there's going to be players who commit to other schools that opt not to get, interest from Kansas, or they are not interested in Kansas, right? So this is going to be an ever-evolving thing here. But as of right now, I've been putting together, it's been very hectic putting this all together with keeping an eye on, I think over 700 names have already entered to this point in time. I've been putting together a document that I'm going to share here if you're watching on YouTube. I'll go over this from the audio perspective, looking at guards, wings, forwards, and centers, different players that KU could go after. And they're looking at different things at each position. They're obviously going to need, a lot of players to come in. As of right now, as of recording, there could be a big variation of how many scholarships they need based on who leaves and that sort of thing. So without further ado, let's just kind of get into this thing. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, we'll have a little bit of a visual for you here with some statistics, but I have things filtered out. So right now we're looking at the guards, and I have some criteria on there about things that I'm looking for. And it doesn't mean that every single thing has to be checked, because if you check every single box, you probably end up with like an all-American player. And if those players were easy to be out there all the time in the portal, then that just doesn't happen realistically, right? Occasionally it does, but it doesn't happen all the time. But realistically, what you're looking for from the guard position for KU are the ability to make threes, at the very least, be able to create your own shot and shot making ability. That can come in a couple different areas. Are you a knockdown 3-point shooter? Are you somebody who can create your own shot, right? Can it come from the mid range? Can it come from three? Can you at least hold up on defense? I don't think I'm necessarily asking for this person to be Marcus Garrett on the defensive end of the floor, but can these people at least not be a horrible defender that it's going to cause Bill Self to not want to play them, right? If you can be a plus defender, then even better, right? And I think you have to have the ability, when we're looking at the guards here, to be able to play off ball. Because with Darren Peterson, there's going to be some possessions where Darren Peterson has the ball in his hands. There's going to be other times where you need somebody to give Darren Peterson a break, or maybe he's on the bench, right? I do think I would like if this player is a starter, right? If this player coming off the bench and they're playing the Diggy Coit role, so to speak, you can be a shorter guard, right? Microwave score off the bench doesn't matter. If you are a starter, I would like, again, this is something that doesn't have to check that box, but ideally, if you get somebody who's, 6'2", 6'3", and above, something like that, that would be a plus. But if you find the best player out there and he's 6 foot, 6'1", you make it work. Okay, so we have different tiers of players here. Tier 1, and this applies for all different positions on my tiers, are possible star players. So I would have included Hunter Dickinson in tier 1 when he was available, right? I mean, Hunter Dickinson was a second and third team All-American in Kansas. That qualifies for being a possible star player. As of right now, I don't think we have any, at least at the guard position, that would apply there. Tier 2 of players we have available are likely starters. So again, this is not a guarantee. This is a category I would have put Rylan Griffin into, and he ended up being a partial starter for KU. But I think the likelihood was that when you brought him in, he was going to be a starter. We worked down to tier 3. Those are players that I would view as, okay, I'm expecting them to be in the rotation at the very least. And they might have a chance of being the fourth or fifth starter if they work their ways up, but at the very least should be in the rotation. Tier 4 is just competing to be a rotation player. You think of like the D. Coit role or the Jalen Coleman-Lands role where, it just kind of depends on the specific game. Maybe you end up working away into that rotation consistently. And then Tier 5 would be fill out the roster, just somebody you're looking to get those extra scholarships up, or maybe a future player, right? Maybe it's a player who is a freshman, showed enough that you want to bring them on for future development. And you're like, I don't know if they'll hit the court this year, but maybe in 2 years we get our hands on them and they can turn into something. So tier 1, we don't have anything for the guard position as of yet. Again, based on when I'm recording. Tier 2, the likely starter. I have 4 players available in this tier, and we have Obi Ogbim. I don't know if that's the proper way to pronounce it, which is a transfer from Wyoming, very good scorer from the Cowboys. He is also good at getting blocks, oddly enough, for guards, 68th percentile for guards in block rate. But he shot 46% on mid-range. That's in the 83rd percentile. Really good above the break threes, 92nd percentile there. And what's interesting, there's a cool little filter on CBB Analytics that you can compare players to other players based on their statistic profile, conference to conference. So his Big 12 comparison is actually Zeke Mayo is one of them. Milos Uzan is the other for the top. Didon Thomas, somebody I'm looking at UNLV. Now, some of the early scuttlebutt there sounds like Houston might be the one to beat. We'll see if that ends up happening. But he's a former top 50 recruit at the guard position. And he's somebody who that makes you think, okay, he could have extra, potential here in what he could turn into. Definitely somebody I'm keeping an eye on. Isaac McNeely entered on Monday morning. He's more of a shooting guard type from Virginia. But if you're looking for shooting on the outside, 7.5 3-point attempts per game at 42%, that becomes interesting as somebody who could play next to Darren Peterson, and he gives you that size. And then Malachi Smith is the other one. And this is a guy who has had injuries in his career at Dayton. He came off a season-ending injury off of last year into this year. And his numbers weren't as good this year, still 38% from three, but as previous seasons. I wonder if this was the get back from the injury year and he has an even better season next year. But that one would be more of a risk that it could be end up a tier 3 player if he's not fully back from the injury. Then we work to our tier 3s, which are likely rotation guys, compete for starting lineups. Jaleel Bethea, very interesting from Miami. A guy KU was in on as a top 10 recruit in the class. Didn't have a very good season at Miami. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see we have this stuff color-coded essentially to where, dark green is good, dark red is bad, or bright red, I guess, is bad. And these numbers, they're being compared to the other players that are in this tab. So these are only compared to the other guards that we have on our list here. Bethea is like red everywhere, except for free throw percentage. But is there a little bit of a Malik Newman opportunity here? Now, Newman wasn't nearly as good as a freshman as he was with KU. He had a year off in between, though. Also, Miami was way worse than Mississippi State was, and Bethea was even worse than Malik Newman was. So I don't know what you think there, but he's a former top 10 recruit going into year 2. He's got good size at 6'5". I'm at least interested there, right? Like, I wouldn't hate it, but then again, after a year in which you took a bunch of swings in the transfer portal, is it smart to do that again, or should you go for more safe bets? Or is that a losing mentality to be like, oh, we had a bad year in the portal, now let's never go for home runs again? I don't know. That doesn't feel like a great way either. Nick Boyd is interesting. He's been a winner at San Diego State and Florida Atlantic and can play on ball, can play off ball a little bit. Somebody to keep an eye on there. Kwamari Peterson is somebody I really like. He has been around. He gets extra year because of the JUCO, but 19.5 points per game, 6.4 3-point attempts per game on a 42%. And the defensive ratings, his on-off defensive rating, minus 11.7, which is really, really good for him. So I don't know. Keep an eye on there. I also have your Mo Odom. He is a guard from Pepperdine, previously Pacific, 7.5 assists per game. If Kansas and Bill Self opts to go for a guy who can be a pass-first guy to help set up Darren Peterson, he maybe becomes of interest. And according to the portal report, Kansas has shown at least some interest there. And then we got Isaiah Watts from Washington State, who not the best offensive numbers there, but he does have really good defensive numbers and defensive kind of scouting report to his game. So that one would be interesting because he's at least done enough, 34.8% from three on high volume. When you combine that with the defense, that maybe that would make for a good pair with Darren Peterson, because you say, okay, well, with Peterson, maybe our big issue is, or not issue, but our big question is, how is he going to defend as a freshman, right? And maybe you take that away with a guy like Watts. And then tier 4, these are guys who I view as being like, okay, they could compete for possibly be a 7th guy for KU. Maybe if you don't win the competition, you end up being the 9th guy. There's been some interest with KU and Deuce Jones. Some of the highlights look really good. He's an athletic guard, and I think you expect him to get better because he'll be a sophomore next year. The shooting numbers are not good, especially very bad on 2-point shots, which I don't necessarily love. But if you're taking a swing on a guy who's going to have multiple years left to be your 8th man or possibly 9th, I don't dislike that necessarily. Christian Henry has insane metrics right now from Eastern Michigan, so keeping an eye on there. Trajan Eaglestaff is somebody who has interest from Kansas, according to Tipton Edits. He's somebody who I would love for Kansas in that specific role, right? If he's replacing the Jalen Coleman Lands Diggy Coit role, if he's going to be your 8th guy and he can come off the bench some games and go 3 for 3 from 3, and then if he's having an off game, he doesn't play as much that game. I love that role. If the idea, because of the interest with Eaglestaff, is that you're going to bring him in to be a starter and replace what Zeke Mayo did, coming from that same conference, I don't like that as much. Also, Javon Hanna, maybe of interest from Western Michigan, more of a driver than a shooter. Nick Graves at Charlotte, somebody who attempts a lot of free throws, gets to the free throw line a ton. It's over 7 of them per game. Jordan Marsh put up really good numbers at UNC Asheville, but a bit of a smaller guard. Jakari White, if you're looking into the Summit League again, good score, really good floater game. And then TK Simpkins put up good numbers. Josh Pasquarelli, he's somebody who popped up for me when I was looking into the numbers. Really good shooter from the outside. And according to one of these sites, All Right, which is not me saying the word, All Right, the name, has interest from Kansas. So we haven't put him on there yet. But that's just kind of a preview deep dive of what some of the guards look like. So what about some of the other positions for KU? What about the wing position? What about the forward position? Who are some other names that kind of come to mind for me? Let's get to that in just a moment. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada, as well as our Team of the Week. Each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart from the top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Despite losing their first 5 SEC games, Coach Cal's Hogs fought their way through the most rugged conference in college basketball to not only make the NCAA tournament, but knock off back-to-back national champion and Hall of Fame coaches en route to the Sweet 16. Yes, we are being trolled by Nissan. They accomplished all this without second leading scorer Boogie Flan for most of the SEC play. This is tough. And without leading scorer and rebounder Adu Fierro so far in the NCAA tournament. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Razorbacks have done here, unfortunately. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop at nissanusa.com. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day to get you ready for the Sweet 16 Elite 8 coming up this next week. Okay, more portal targets for KU. Probably got to go a little bit faster to get through the rest of the positions here. I'm debating whether I want to, because again, if you're watching on YouTube, we had a kind of Google sheet with some interesting stats and showing the guys that I have them sorted out. I'm debating putting it up on my Substack just so that people can constantly reference it and have an idea and we can constantly update it. Well, we'll see if I decide to do that or not, or just keep it here for the podcast. I guess hit me up on social media at D Johnson Radio. If you want me to put it up publicly so it helps you keep track of things, let me know. Anyway, moving on to the wing position. Again, I don't have anybody in tier 1, which for the wings, I'm looking at 3-point ability, shot making, can at least hold up on defense again. Doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands, because if you're going to get a combo guard and Darren Peterson, those two are going to have the ball in their hands the most. So good off-ball play. And I want somebody, if they're going to be a wing who's going to play the 4, right? If it's a wing who's going to play the 2-3, I still would like them to be at least a solid rebounder. But if you're a winger who's going to play the 4, I really want them to be a good rebounder. So tier 1, again, I don't have a possible star player here, at least as of yet. Tier 2, though, likely starter, Josh Dix. We're doing a series with our shorts, which check those out, where we're going to be doing a different transfer portal target or somebody of interest I think, every day. And Josh Dix was the first one we talked about today. He's a 6'6" wing from Iowa. He'll be a senior, over 14 points per game, 42% from three on almost 5 attempts per game, 60% effective field goal rate, which is very, very good. His true shooting percentage, 92nd percentile nationally. He's awesome on corner threes and really from everywhere, but especially the corner. Good from the mid-range and really good assist to turnover rate. Big question becomes the defensive side of the ball, but also not in a great situation in Iowa, who like never had good defenses under Fran McCaffrey. So I don't know. He might actually end up being just like an average defender, which would be all that you're asking out of him given the offense. Blake Harper, somebody who's interesting, who was at Howard this year. I've seen some places list him at 6'5", others 6'8". I don't know what the deal is there. He had 16 points in the opener against Kansas. Now, Howard was a bad team in a bad conference, but he put up big numbers and did it efficiently, and he won the MEAC Player of the Year, despite the fact that the team wasn't very good, which shows the respect from the coaches around the league. I am in on Elijah Freeman. He's the transfer from Division II Lincoln Memorial. I think we've seen with Bennett Sturts, for instance, this year. We saw it last year with the Minix kid at Morehead State, who's now with the San Antonio Spurs, coming from the NAIA level. If you're good enough, you can make that jump up in competition. And Freeman is 6'8", and if you watch the film, freak athlete. Like, he's throwing down dunks from just a foot inside the free throw line. I think that translates up, right? I do like Elijah Freeman, and he would be somebody I would love to see playing the 4 for KU next season. So he's in that tier 2 for me. I forget the way to pronounce it, but Josan Sanan, the guard from Arizona State, really good shooter. Didn't really do much else, but he's a former top 25 recruit, so you expect a big jump from what was already a good shooting season from him. He's played in the Big 12, so that's good. Apparently some of his recruiting stuff was a headache, though, in high school, so I don't know how that impacts things here in the transfer portal. Then we move to tier 3. These are the likely rotation, competing for starting lineup guys. I would almost view this as like the Isaiah Moss role. Moss sometimes early in the season was coming off the bench, but was in the rotation. Then he ended up starting at the end of the season. So different ways you can go with this one. Mr. Dean is somebody of interest. He can play the 3 or the 4. Really good rebounder and really good in fast break, really good at getting steals and blocking shots. He's a really good offensive rebounder specifically. That could be a fun little lineup, but you wouldn't really have much shooting if he's playing the 4 next to Flory at the 5. LeJay Jones, transfer from St. Bonaventure. He's a 6'7" wing. He's somebody who shoots well, 39%, doesn't require the ball in his hand, just a 31st percentile usage rate, and has a 97th percentile Hakeem rate, which is block plus steal rate. So good defender, basically a 3-and-D wing. That I would be very into, especially in this specific role where it's like, could end up working in the starting lineup as your 5th guy, or he ends up being your 6th or 7th man. I really would like LeJay Jones there. Marion Dickerson, interesting, from Robert Morris. He 6'7" wing, was the defensive player of the year in his conference. He's had 25-9 with 5 combined blocks and steals against Alabama in the first round. So he becomes of interest there. Kobe McGee, really good shooter, 6'6" out of Drexel, 44%. Again, somebody who maybe is more of a shooter than anything else. So that would be more of probably your bench shooter role. Sam Lewis, kind of same thing from Toledo, but I think McGee is just the better version of it. He takes almost 2 more threes per game than Lewis, though Lewis does have actually a little bit better defensive metrics. And then Rashad King from Northeastern, who is averaging 18.5 points per game. And he had a 90th percentile Hakeem rate, which is a good combo when you're also averaging 19.5 or 18.5 points per game and 6.5 rebounds per game. Tier 4, just guys who, could be that back end of the rotation role, possibly. Billy Smith from Bellarmine, if you just want a shooter, 95% at the line, 39% from 3. Quentin Mincy, putting up good numbers at UMass Lowell, but that is a big jump in competition. So that would just be kind of, can you be the 9th guy? You've had production previously. There was some interest reported from KU, I should mention, in Jones and McGee as well. But Chandler Jackson, who is a wing for Florida State, who has not been that good. So that would go in my tier 5 column of fill out the roster. That would be kind of my assumption there. Maybe doing a favor for Leonard Hamilton, who Bill Self used to coach with, and be like, hey, take this guy on. He is at the very least a good defender, so that would be interesting. Moving to the forward position, Bryce Hopkins is my one guy I have available in tier 1. Problem is, he entered the portal with a no contact tag, so I'm not really expecting that one to happen. Tier 2, likely starter, Dalen Swain. I teetered back and forth whether he was tier 2 or tier 3, but the transfer from Xavier, 11 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists, really good numbers there for a 4-man, 1.6 steals per game, really good defender, shoots really well at the free throw line, doesn't really shoot many threes though. And if you bring him on and he's playing the 4, is that just basically saying we have another version of KJ Adams who can shoot it at least a little bit? So I don't know. Maybe I've thought about what I should do with Swain, to be honest. Taylor Bull Bowen from Florida State, name of interest here, 6'10", can play the 4 or the 5, only 195 pounds. So I don't know how much you want him playing the 5. He's mostly a shooter, despite the fact being 6'10", 41% from 3, bit of low volume here, but he's given 2.5 blocks plus steals per game. So, that would be a fun, lengthy front court if you have Bullbone at the 4 and Flory at the 5, theoretically. Jermichael Stillwell, really good rebounder. If you just want to steer into that, 10.7 per game here in our tier 3, averaging 13 points per game at Milwaukee. He over 2 threes per game, but under 30%. But I guess at the very least he can shoot them. But 98th percentile offensive rebound rate, 99th percentile defensive rebound rate. So, if you have him as your third or fourth big, like where he's coming off the bench and just grabbing rebounds and providing energy, that's not the worst thing in the world. Tier 4, competing to be a rotation player. Josh Harris from North Florida and Stephen Olowuni from Southern Indiana in there. I am running out of time, so I don't want to get too much in the stats on those guys. Last position here is center. We'll start with tier 2 likely starter. Owen Freeman, KU contacted him apparently, but I don't love that fit. He's a 6'10", 245-pound center who does have actually really good defensive metrics, which is weird on Iowa. Really good fast break scorer in Iowa's up and down offense. He can shoot the 3 a little bit, 31%, though on low volume for them. I don't love the fit of Freeman next to Flory. I want, if you're going to play 2 bigs, I want both of them to be, at least a little bit mobile. And I don't know that I view that the same way with Freeman. Here's where this one I'm very interested in. Magoon Gwath, he is a transfer from San Diego State, entered the portal, 7-footer, 205 pounds. He 38% from 3. Now, low volume, 1.7 per game, but that was as a freshman, and he was a raw freshman coming in. I've heard like Sam Vecini, for instance, of the Athletics, saying that he thinks he'll be a first-round pick in 2 years. So in the draft of 2027. If you have an opportunity to get a guy who could be a first-round pick in a couple of years, you don't turn that guy down. And you could play a few minutes of Gwath next to Badunga because both are mobile, and Gwath can at least shoot it a little bit, right? But you could also just, split the 5 minutes between the two of them, and they still end up with 20 to 25 minutes per game, and you would have a freakishly switch-heavy. This guy averaged 2.6 blocks per game. He was in the 99th percentile for Akeem rate and block rate. I am all about Magoon Gwath. Like Gwath and I don't know, maybe Josh Dix and Elijah Freeman. Like those might be my favorite players right now in the portal for KU. Also some interesting backup bigs that I have in tier 4 here of guys who you view as, could you come on? Because are you going to be content if you're the backup to Flory, right? And if you had Gwath, then this doesn't probably become a thing. But like, would you be content playing 10 to 12 minutes per game, maybe 15 if you can play a little bit next to Flory, right? Cooper Schweiger, really good numbers at Valparaiso, though Valpo wasn't that good. He did have 16-8 at Ohio State. In his last 4 games, he finished averaging 22 and 12. That was good to see, and I think he's from like Overland Park, so that's good. Gabe Dines, somebody I like, 7'3" center who is in the one of the best shot blockers in the country, 3.1 blocks per game. Actually more mobile than you would think. I wouldn't mind him as the backup center to Flory to be like, oh, okay, you just have this elite shot blocker coming in for 8 to 10 minutes as the backup. Seems like there's a lot of interest for KU and Schweiger, but also this next guy, Christoph Tilley, who's a transfer from Santa Clara. Not very good rebounding numbers, but good assist numbers, good steal numbers for center, 12.5 per game. The field goal percentage, not great there, but he can at least shoot it a little bit from 3. So, if he's your backup big, experienced 7-footer, not the worst thing in the world. And then Paul Otieno, who is somebody who would be making a huge jump in competition. But if he's playing, 8 minutes per night, maybe that's okay. I have a tier 5 guy here, which is Luke Bangoy from VCU. This is my tier 5 is the future pick, right? He would be a sophomore next year. Didn't really do anything well except block shots, but he had a 99th percentile block shot rate. So you bring him into the program, maybe redshirt him for a year, and then maybe he's good to go to be a rotation guy the year after, and maybe get a bigger role after that the year after. Just kind of an interesting one if you're looking to fill out the roster later on in the portal. All right, KU football is approaching spring portal as well. Let's discuss that. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast, far, from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code S-H-5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com, S-H-5. Continuing on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with a little KU football. And sorry, that might have been information overload. I probably went through too many names. We will start narrowing this stuff down. KU has visits or more reported interest. We are going to start doing like our individual deep dives of players, and maybe that's just a better way of doing it, that we'll just kind of go about it that way. But or breaking it down more into one position. Like maybe next time we discuss this, we'll just break down the guard targets or the wing targets or whatever it is. But at the very least, the point is, there's so many names that are now in the portal that it is information overload for me. It's information overload for you, but hopefully that narrowed things down maybe a little bit more between guys that either KU has shown interest in, guys that I'm interested by, or whatever it ends up being, right? Meanwhile, for KU football, spring portal is going to be here before you know it. I do think Kansas is at a point where they're going to need, on the football field, probably another offensive lineman or two at this point in time. Obviously, if you're in a situation to bring on a player like what you did with Bryce Foster, in the summer last year, where it's this like can't miss, really good player right away. It doesn't matter what position is, you bring him in. But I found this interesting, that Ashaad Williams, this was something that goes back a week or two, but he's going to be visiting KU. He's a defensive back. And at this stage, it does beg the question, if you're going for a defensive back, because KU has a lot of young DBs in there, does that mean that some of them are not ready yet? Or is this just a direct response to Demarius McGee retiring from football, where you just want another body in there for depth? Or is it that you feel like one of your two starters isn't as good as you want it to be? You like the way some of the young guys are coming along, but you're not for sure that one of them's ready to start this year. And so that's where Ashaad Williams comes interesting. I don't know if KU will get him or not, but he, coming from the FCS level, has had some really good numbers in 2024. The first 2 years of play there, the PFF grades weren't great, but this past year, an 81.6 coverage grade. So this would be a really nice pickup if KU could get him. He's visiting, I think, 3 other schools in addition to KU, but he's rated as an 88 transfer by 24/7 Sports, which, out of comparison, Bengali Kamara got a 92, the linebacker from South Carolina. Keon Burnett, the transfer tight end from Arizona, got an 89, and Emmanuel Henderson, who seems to be getting rave reviews during spring ball for KU, got an 88. So that would be the same line with that. So if you did bring in Ashaad Williams, I think the expectation would be to certainly be one of the top 3 corners, if not be one of the top 2 in the rotation for KU, which if you're adding somebody, going back to the idea that can make your team that much better, you do it no matter what. But it does become a little bit interesting in terms of where would the fit be? Does this mean you view somebody as more of a slot corner, and you want Williams to come in on the outside? Does it mean that if they don't get Williams, they're going to be looking for other DBs? Or is it just they feel like there's a good player available? Let's go out and get him. It'll be something interesting to track for KU football, if they can land his commitment, and if not, what the response is from there for Lance Leipold and company. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. We're going to have plenty more KU basketball offseason transfer portal content coming at you, including some deep dives on some possible targets for KU. And certainly there will be some movement from the KU side of things that we'll have to get to at some point in time as well. But we'll see you next time for another edition of LOJ, anywhere you get your podcast or on our YouTube page.